All right, welcome back to the New Equity Network show. I'm Michael Yorba, your host, and co-host Ed Baxter. All right, we're talking with David Duggan, CEO Viral Networks, Inc., and we're going to get a little granular on this segment because he's got some proprietary software that really takes, as Ed, you were saying on the break, micro trends and drives macro trends, right? David?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
No, that's definitely it.
Bring it out.
The software?
No, the how you get in and create micro trends and drive macro trends with this, because when you were talking to me about this the other day, conversations that occur around topics or people, you're able to track those and then drive those people to a funnel that turns into a results-oriented effort where people actually end up buying from the customer instead of just a branding process.
Absolutely. And that's one of the coolest part of what we do is one of the two softwares we have. We dub it the social intelligence platform. And it's very Big Brother-esque, where any conversation that takes place online that's in a public domain, which most blogs, chat rooms, social media sites are all public, we can track those conversations. So to make it relevant to the stock market, we track the top 40 biotech stocks, the top 40 gold stocks, silver stocks, tech stocks, you name it. And anytime anyone anywhere in the world mentions any of those companies, obviously their symbol, the name of the company, any of their projects, to the whole mix, we'll be able to track whatever that conversation is and aggregate all that information into one stream. So if we have a specific client that's in the biotech space, let's say, then we'll go look at anyone who's already talking about the top 40 biotech stocks, and we're going to be able to either individually message those people. So even if they're on a blog somewhere in Europe, we can message them from our platform and respond to them and say, hey, we saw what you said about XYZ company. Have you heard of this other, maybe it's a smaller biotech company, but it's on the right track to being similar to other company. And if we wanted to filter the results to only see the people who are very influential in their space, then we can just say, hey, of all the people who've talked about the biotech companies, we only want to see people who reach more than 10,000 people with every one of their messages. So it makes it very, very targeted. And when we get some of those people to cover the specific company that we're representing, then you get mass exposure and mass distribution from a very small amount of actual conversations.
Ed, you've got a question?
From what I've heard so far, David, it appears that you have kind of what I call a algorithmic multiplication program going on, where you're essentially targeting those centers of influence, looking at the micro trends they create, and essentially taking those micro trends and broadcasting them into creating, or what I said earlier, a macro type trend. And what we've seen so far over the last few years or so is the ability to track those micro trends. What makes Viral Network so precise in being able to do that?
Yeah, a lot of it comes down to the social element and being able to track individual conversations, but it also relays into our digital advertising ability. Is when we go to fine-tune a target audience for a specific client, and we input all the keywords, the key phrases, and we say, let's only go after people who have talked about resource investing or swing trading, anything like that. It will show us a handful of websites that have content that's relevant to that topic. So we can then deploy advertisement to go along with that. So if you look at the total numbers across North America alone, we actually have access to approximately 26 to 27 million people who are dubbed potential investors. But for the most part, when we get into the micro-targeting side of things, on an individual client basis, usually the target audience is between 4 and 6 million people. So it's a massive amount of people that we have access to, and it's just about being intelligent about how we introduce those people to the story over a longer period of time.
How do you guard against, when you're contacting or messaging those centers of influence, how do you guard against them thinking of you as nothing more than just a securities propaganda group?
That's a great question, and one of the big reasons why we've set the company up the way we have is because we are completely a ghost. We don't do anything under our brand. We simply represent the company, the public companies that we represent. We use their brand to communicate directly with these people online. So it's the official brand of the company, or it's the internal IR person. We'll help them get accounts on those websites and social media accounts. So when we start conversations, it's official, it's from the company, and it's always pre-approved messaging. So it's not any opinion-based. It's just, hey, take a look at this company, take a look at our landing page. If you have any questions, join our email list and get in the system. So it looks very official, and for a personalized message to go directly from the IR person or the company itself to an influencer like that, a lot of times it's received as a very welcome message, and they think they're being singled out, and it's a really nice gesture. So yeah, we definitely do not come off as what you just referred to, because we're completely a ghost behind the scenes, and it's just the individual companies that are being represented.
Well, we know in the past, having come from the securities world, we've seen that where, as you mentioned earlier in the first segment, you talked about, quote unquote, the salesman associated with the process. Do you see this when you contact these influencers, just like you just said? Do you see this as a de facto seal of approval for what they're doing, and an ego stroke for them that allows them to accept it?
Oh yeah, for sure, and that's why this whole system works. Is most of the influencers, all they care about is getting more influence. So they want to reach more people, they want more followers, more fans, and whatever their own self-interest is, whether they're trying to sell their subscriber base or they're a blogger or whatever it is. So if they're getting individually, pinpointed, then it's definitely an ego stroke, and a lot of times the conversation that would happen between the influencer and the company, it'll show up on their screen, so they look more official. They're dealing with a big company, and that definitely boosts their ego as well.
Wow, that is definitely ahead of the. I've heard the term behavioral marketing patterns, and being able to use that. Can you go into that a little bit? Because it seems like that's what you're doing. You're following conversations, you're figuring out behaviors, and then you're using that to drive those people to the intended spot.
Yeah, exactly. That's why it's such an amazing system, is because a lot of the traditional forms of marketing rely on one rigid list or
right.
one specific pool of people, where I've been asked sometimes from companies, they say, well, our specific sector isn't sexy at the moment. It's not running the way it was 2 or 3 years ago. And so when we run our numbers and we look at let's say the gold space, for instance, on average per month we would have had access to about 3.5 to 4 million people that were specifically interested in gold companies about 2 or 3 years ago when gold was running in a big way. Now the numbers are only about 1.2 to 1.4, but that's still a massive amount of people. So behaviorally, it might be different people. You never know why someone might be interested in gold for this specific reason, and that's what's so unique about the psychology behind someone making an investment decision is it's always changing. So if you're relying on one specific list of the same people and you're saying the same thing over and over again, then a lot of times it'll dry up and a huge amount of those people will become uninterested. So the fact that we're doing real-time searches every single day and the people that we're reaching out to are relevant that specific moment, that's what makes the content and the people so powerful and so high quality.
Well, that goes back to the other thing we talked about earlier about the quote-unquote micro trends. I know there are advertising groups out there that look for trends that last as little as 15 seconds if they can post information to sites based on that. One thing that stands out about what you do that I find most intriguing, you can kind of speak to this if you'd like, is the idea of what you just mentioned when you talked about a static versus a dynamic approach to creating names for the purpose of email marketing or marketing directly through those influencers. Your approach appears to be quite dynamic. Can you kind of speak to that for a second?
And we really got like 1 minute before we go out, so if you can, just concise it for us, okay?
Sure, yeah, and it all comes down to creating one centralized landing page for the company, so the best version of the sales pitch is there. And then, depending on the size of the budget, we can trickle in a certain amount of new investors either every day, every month, etc., and pinpoint a specific audience. And obviously, the end goal is to have the people who visit the landing page to convert as either an email subscriber or call in the company for more information. So the company ends up with an asset. They end up with an email list that they own, as well as a much larger distribution channel for when they have news. And then we can allocate more of the budget towards pushing specific catalysts rather than wasting the budget every month over and over again.
David, we've got to go, but thank you so much for a great interview. I want to have you back on the show so we can start dissecting this piece by piece as we go forward, and the people listening can avail themselves of your service. One last time, viralnetworkinc.com.